I recently got married at 24 to my husband after 4 years together. Instead of the beach wedding we dreamed of, where we've shared many happy moments, our ceremony was a small, intimate affair at his aunt's farmhouse. I had saved up for 3 years from my job as an editorial photographer, hoping for a grand celebration by the sea to share a beautiful, luxurious time with our guests. However, our plans dramatically changed a few months back. My parents urgently requested to borrow $210,100 from me, claiming it was for critical medical treatment for my father. His sudden illness was supposedly due to complications from diabetes, and they mentioned needing an expensive imported drug not covered by their insurance. Concerned for my father, I provided the funds without hesitation, believing I was helping cover essential medical expenses. Over time, I grew suspicious. My mother dodged my requests for medical reports, and though my father was always in bed during my visits, he didn't seem convincingly ill. I didn't confront them initially, fearing the repercussions if my suspicions were wrong. Amidst this, I found out my brother Jack had already left for his honeymoon in Europe, funded by my parents using the money I lent them under the guise of a medical emergency. He hadn't planned to tell me until after returning, hoping to surprise everyone with stories and photos. This revelation came only because I mentioned our father's supposed condition, prompting Jack to address my concerns. Feeling deceived and taken advantage of, my husband and I opted for a quiet wedding on the farm, keeping it a secret from my family, who had misused my trust and funds. This situation has strained my relationship with my parents, leading to significant financial and emotional repercussions. After Jack got married, he went on a lavish honeymoon funded by our parents. This detail only came to light after I reached out to him, concerned about our father's health. Initially, when I received a request from my mother to lend $210,100 for an urgent medical treatment for my dad, I didn't hesitate. She mentioned a rare, expensive drug that wasn't covered by insurance. Given my father's supposed critical condition, I felt compelled to help. Over time, however, my visits and observations didn't align with the severity of the illness portrayed by my parents. My dad didn't seem as ill as claimed, and my requests for medical documentation were consistently evaded. Doubts crept in, but I held back from accusing them without concrete proof, not wanting to create a family rift over potentially unfounded suspicions. The truth unraveled when I discussed my concerns with Jack. He mentioned enjoying an extravagant honeymoon, unaware of any health crisis at home, which was jarring considering the urgency conveyed to me. He revealed that our parents were covering his honeymoon expenses, which included stays at top-tier hotels, fine dining, and extensive shopping, all amounting to around $27,700. It dawned on me then that there was no medical emergency. My parents had concocted the entire scenario to divert my wedding fund to Jack's honeymoon. I felt a deep sense of betrayal upon learning that the savings I had carefully put aside for my dream beach wedding were misused. When confronted, my parents admitted they fabricated the medical emergency, rationalizing that it was the only way I'd part with the money. They wanted to give Jack a memorable gift without tapping into their retirement savings. They believed I was young and capable of earning back the money. But this was a crucial moment for Jack, who needed a break from work-related stress. Their justification did little to ease my anger. I had been saving diligently, living modestly, and planning meticulously to fund my own wedding. My parents' actions not only missiled me, but also forced me to scale down my wedding plans drastically. I insisted they repay me before my wedding. I needed those funds to cover the significant costs associated with a beach wedding, which my husband's family was helping with but couldn't fully fund. My parents had made it clear early on that they could either pay for my college education or my wedding, not both. I chose education, knowing I'd self-fund my wedding. This situation led me to reconsider my wedding plans entirely, opting for a smaller, more intimate ceremony at my husband's aunt's farmhouse. While this wasn't the wedding I had envisioned, it became a celebration of our love, untainted by the deceit that overshadowed my original plans. When Jack began college, I casually asked him if our parents had forced him to choose between funding for his education or a wedding, just as they had with me. He left off the idea, which suggested that he hadn't faced the same ultimatum. I didn't press the issue with my parents at the time, as I was still financially reliant on them, and I hadn't secured a job yet. I didn't want to stir up any family drama by pointing out their apparent favoritism. Years later, the issue resurfaced dramatically when I confronted my parents about using the money I had diligently saved over 3 years for my wedding to finance Jack's extravagant honeymoon. Despite their denials, it was evident they favored him. I insisted they repay me, refusing to compromise my dream wedding because of Jack's job struggles. They could pamper him on their dime, but it was unfair to redirect my hard-earned savings. My parents responded that they couldn't return the full amount before my wedding and expected it to take years to repay. They argued that nothing was more important than family, rationalizing that if I was willing to pay for a medical emergency, I should be willing to prevent Jack from potentially falling into depression. However, Jack's work issues stemmed from his casual attitude toward his web designer sales job, where his income was largely commission-based. He wasn't seriously troubled by his job performance. He simply wasn't accustomed to striving hard due to a lifetime of being coddled by our parents. I stressed to my parents how vital this wedding was, not just to me, but also to my future in-laws, as I had commitments to fulfill financially that would now be impossible without the funds. Yet my parents maintained they couldn't refund the money in time for the wedding. I found myself pleading with them, but they remained unmoved, assuring me they'd eventually repay the sum, just not in time for my needs. I left their house in tears, feeling utterly defeated. When I shared everything with my husband, his frustration matched mine. He was just as disappointed and angered by their empty promises and lack of empathy for our situation. Furious and more frustrated than I was, my husband considered contacting a lawyer. However, I explained that there would be no point because all our agreements with my parents had been verbal. There was no written evidence that my mother had claimed the money was for medical expenses or that she had promised to repay it. We had no contracts, documents, or even text messages to support our claims, making a legal case not only weak, but also potentially expensive and fruitless. Reluctantly, we decided against pursuing legal action. Instead, we focused on adapting our wedding plans, which felt like a more constructive use of our energy and resources. In a fortunate turn of events, my husband's family stepped in. His aunt generously offered her farmhouse as a venue for free, which, although it wasn't the beach setting we had envisioned, was a beautiful and welcoming space. Upon visiting, I immediately felt a connection to the place. It was perfect for us under the circumstances. With the venue secured, I threw myself into planning the wedding, which became a welcome distraction, and solidified my decision to cut my parents out of my life and the wedding. I was initially uncertain about inviting Jack. He hadn't known about the funding switch, so his direct fault was minimal. However, when he returned from his honeymoon and scolded me for demanding the money back from our parents, claiming I was making a big deal out of nothing, and insisting I just suck it up and scale down my wedding, it clarified things for me. His lack of empathy and understanding removed any doubt about not inviting him as well. As the plans progressed, the reality of having a less extravagant wedding than originally envisioned settled in. Surprisingly, this worked out for the best. The scaled-down wedding was not only beautiful, but also more reflective of who we truly were, not the image we thought we needed to project. It was intimate and genuine, filled with people who truly supported us. In hindsight, the constraints imposed by my parents' actions and the subsequent reduction of our wedding budget stripped away any pretense and highlighted what was truly important: celebrating our union with those who cared for us without conditions. The day was perfect because it was truly about us, a celebration of our love and commitment rather than an extravagant display. Reflecting on the decision to scale back the lavish wedding plans initially intended to impress, my husband and I chose a more meaningful path. We used our budget thoughtfully, focusing on what truly mattered: being surrounded by those who genuinely cared for us on our special day. The outcome was a dreamy, beautiful ceremony without unnecessary pomp, proving that a wedding doesn't have to be grand to be memorable. After the wedding, I shared photos on social media, intentionally after everyone invited had attended, ensuring the secrecy to avoid drama from my parents and Jack. Given our strained relationships, they were not informed about the wedding. Their absence allowed us to enjoy a peaceful, intimate celebration without their interference. However, the day after I posted the wedding photos, my parents and Jack, upon seeing the posts, confronted me in a phone call, demanding to know why they hadn't been invited. Surprisingly, they seemed to expect an invitation despite our last painful interactions, where I left their house in tears after a heated argument and hadn't spoken to them since. Similarly, my last conversation with Jack had left me feeling blamed and dismissed as being dramatic. I explained to them that after they had misused my wedding fund, I had to drastically cut costs, choosing to invite only close family and friends who genuinely supported us. They were not included because of their actions and the hurt they had caused. Feeling unapologetic yet firm, I ended the call and blocked them, hoping to move forward without further conflict. However, an hour later, my husband relayed that Jack had contacted him, sharing that my mother was devastated by my words, having cried to the point of nearly fainting, though possibly an exaggeration. This made me feel a surge of guilt. I wondered if I had been too harsh despite their betrayal. Now, a week later, I'm left contemplating the consequences of my decisions during and after the wedding. It's a complex mix of relief for having a beautiful wedding true to ourselves, and a lingering sadness for the family rift that has deepened, leaving me to ponder if things could have been handled differently. After that last intense conversation with my parents and Jack, I decided to cut off communication with them. My mother's tears wouldn't change the truth of the situation. On the day I confronted them about the misuse of my wedding fund, I was the one in tears, desperately pleading for them to return the money before my wedding. They dismissed my feelings, treating the matter lightly, so I resolved to do the same, distance myself, and minimize their impact on my life. It's true what they say: you reap what you sow. I explicitly told Jack to stop contacting both me and my husband. My husband was unrelated to these family issues, and I wanted to shield him from their petty antics. After sending that message, I blocked Jack to cut off any remaining access they had to me. My family had mistreated me for years, and I was determined not to tolerate it any longer. While a lawsuit seemed like a far-fetched idea, given the lack of tangible evidence, my husband believed it was worth considering. He began consulting with a reputable lawyer, and we planned to decide soon on whether to pursue legal action. Our goal was to somehow make them admit they had misled me about the medical emergency to funnel my money into Jack's lavish honeymoon. Proving this in court would be challenging, but I felt compelled to hold them accountable. I deserved to have my money returned, and I was prepared to do whatever necessary to ensure that happened. Yesterday, I reiterated to Jack the importance of keeping my husband out of our family drama. Ironically, this led him to do the exact opposite. After work, my husband informed me that my parents and Jack had bombarded him with texts, demanding he convince me to unblock them. When he ignored their messages, they escalated the situation by showing up at his workplace. They waited outside and followed his car when he left, honking until he pulled over. Knowing they wouldn't relent and might follow him home, he decided to confront them directly to prevent further disturbance at our house. They met at a nearby diner where they could discuss things privately. At the diner, Jack approached my husband's car window and insisted they talk in person. Inside, Jack expressed his belief that our parents were deeply hurt by my actions, suggesting that we should reconcile and that family should come first. However, my husband, having seen the distress and manipulation I'd endured, supported my decision to maintain distance. We both agreed it was crucial not to let their guilt tactics sway us from protecting our peace and pursuing what we felt was right. After the last tumultuous conversation with my parents and Jack, I had decided to cut ties completely. My family believed my decision to sever contact over the mishandling of my wedding fund was excessive. They even accused me of overreacting by suggesting we weren't family anymore. They tried to reach out through my husband, hoping he could persuade me to reconsider, emphasizing that family should stick together despite the monetary issues. They also reiterated their promise to return the money, but insisted it couldn't be done all at once, citing Jack's work struggles and their impending retirement as reasons for the delay. My husband played a key role during this interaction. Instead of confronting them directly, he cleverly made them feel heard, suggesting that a heartfelt message from them might help resolve the conflict. Naively, they took his advice, thinking it might soften my stance and lead to reconciliation. Little did they know, my husband was subtly steering them to admit their actions in writing, providing us with the evidence we needed to pursue legal action. I have to admit, I'm quite impressed, and even a bit proud, of how ingeniously my husband handled the situation. He's my evil genius. His strategy paid off, and soon we received an email from them outlining all their deceptions and essentially confessing to their misuse of my funds. This email was the admission of guilt we needed to move forward legally. We are now working with our lawyer to recover the $210,100, money that represents 4 years of hard work, careful saving, and many personal sacrifices. It's not just about the amount, it's about justice and the principle of the matter. My parents and Jack made their choices, and now they must face the consequences of those actions. In the midst of this legal battle, we've also started planning our honeymoon. We're opting for a modest getaway to the beach, a place of special significance for us, marking both the beginning of our relationship challenges and a spot where we've shared countless happy memories. This decision reflects our realization that happiness doesn't require grand gestures or excessive spending. After all, the essence of our life together comes from enjoying simple, meaningful moments. This experience has been a profound reminder that we control our happiness and the direction of our lives, not the expectations or actions of others. Now we look forward to focusing on our future, filled with love, integrity, and the simple joys that bring us true contentment.